All right, welcome back, guys. We are in the book Leading with Emotional Courage by Peter Bregman. It's great. We are jumping into 4 different elements, and we're starting with element 1, which is build your confidence. And this is basically like in emotional intelligence, we're taking a look at ourselves. So we're jumping in, and this is your first time jumping in, Scott. How did you, what's your first take on the beginning chapters?
Yeah, really enjoying it. I like that the chapters are short. I tend to listen to these books and they're 5 or 6 minutes, so this is a pretty easy read. A lot of similar elements to what we've been listening to in other books over the past year now. So I really look forward to hearing more of what he has to say. But as you said, with this first element, it's building your confidence, knowing who you are and becoming who you want to be. So some really great stuff in here. It's not unlike our last book, which was super deep. This one is, so far, I think, super practical, very meaningful, easy to apply. So really enjoying it.
Right. Building your confidence. I'm going to start off with this, one of his first lines, introducing this element. Just about everything meaningful and worthwhile you choose to do in the world requires that you have a strong and powerful belief in yourself and your ability to make an impact. Meaning confidence really just comes from an inner belief system. And of course, for us, I think it's rightly so, because if you truly believe that God made you with specific strengths, with a specific purpose, a reason, things that he's called you to, that can give you a lot of confidence. Okay.
Absolutely.
So part 1, because each of the elements are broken into 2 parts. Chapter 1, which is kind of wonky because your Audible is, I find it a little bit strange, and it's confusing that your chapters don't line up with mine. But if you buy the book, then in chapter 1, it is be yourself. It does say the high cost of conformity and how to avoid it. Because it's saying that research does show that we tend to conform to behaviors of those around us. In fact, I think it was Jim Rohn that says you're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with most. Meaning you will often take on attributes. That's basically how culture happens, because there's a lot of commonalities when you're hanging out with the people who only speak English or who are only listening to country music, right? Which I don't, but okay. So, but be yourself.
That's right. And I like when he says, in terms of building your self-confidence, again, the book is very practical. He says, it's one thing to say, we could say in a recovery meeting, like the one we have tonight, we could say, you just need to be more self-confident.
Yeah.
But I like how Bregman the author takes it to the next step, and he gives some very practical ways to build your self-confidence. And here he says, saying something when no one else is saying anything is very difficult, which we all know. But he says, if we start to practice that, even in small ways, that will build our confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so for recovery, if we're working on small ways to build our self-confidence, the idea is that it will move us forward in our recovery. So he gives the examples of work. We might, keep our desk neat, something that small when everybody else or the office neat when nobody else at the office seems to care. Or small decisions like that really represent who we are. He says those kinds of small decisions help to build your confidence. And then we would take it a step further and say, building your confidence is going to help us move forward in our recovery.
And it happens little by little, right? You have to start with smaller things that, like you said, it will help. It'll make you feel like you're standing apart, but there is a level of confidence you're building each time you're saying something that you feel aligns to yourself. So he does give a few steps here. I'll quickly go through them, but first is to actually know what your clear, strong, committed values are. Meaning, have you ever thought about what you actually value? Have you ever taken the time to distinguish your values from other people's and not just go with the crowd, but to know that you've really decided something? The next step is to see what is going on around you. Can you see it for what it is? Meaning, is it aligning with yourself or is it not? Are you just letting the current take you? And then 3, you need the courage to act when something is going on that is out of sync with your values. And he does talk about do it skillfully and with respect, of course. He's not saying just stop talking to people, but I do think it's important to have that space. I think that's what we need, is the space and the time to actually think through, you know what, I do agree with this, or I don't. But you need to make a decision, because not making one means that you don't have confidence in yourself.
That's right. And I like that he prepares you for what that will feel like and what to do with it. He says, feel the impact of going against the grain.
Yeah.
And I like that language. It's basically saying, it's one thing to motivate and stand up and say, just go against the grain. If everybody's doing this, do the opposite. But he says, feel the impact of going against the grain and recognize that you can tolerate that feeling, right? Like it doesn't knock you down. And then he goes on to say, realizing that you can tolerate that feeling is the secret to emotional courage. I love that. Doesn't make it easy, but embrace it. Realize it's not going to knock you off your horse. And then he says, knowing you can tolerate it, that's the secret to emotional courage.
Yeah. So chapter 2, let's move into chapter 2, because it does say find your ground, stay steady, balanced, and calm. Ties in well with that last subject.
Yes, it does. And again, similar ideas. Don't be a victim to the whim of circumstance.
Right.
One of 2 words that mean a lot to me that don't always live out very well, but trying to, are the words slow down.
Right.
Down.
And that's going against the grain too. Just slowing down is not going with the current. I mean, you will feel it too. Even just thinking about standing in the river, you'll feel the pressure of the water moving against you. So there's no doubt about that. This is where he does talk about notice the self, which is really interesting, because we've talked a lot about breathing. We've talked about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic going in and out, right? And this is where he says you can be breathing, but notice the self that is breathing as well. Notice how the person is doing, how yourself is feeling and thinking while the breathing is happening.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot. Again, I feel like every book we've read almost talks about breathing, which is fascinating to me. And but that particular line you just mentioned reminds me of what we read from Dr. Vanderkolk in our last book, The Body Keeps the Score. I'll never forget when he said, same idea, pay attention to your breathing, but he says in particular, without explanation, pay attention when you exhale to the air going over your top lip. And I'm like, but he doesn't say why. But I assume, similarly to what Bregman's saying here, is
Yeah.
it's the concept. It's not there's something magical in the air going over your top lip, but it's the idea that you're paying attention very specifically to
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
breathing once again comes through as an important. It's how God made us.
Right. And that's how he's saying, don't fall under the whim of every circumstance. Because, let's say your car breaks down, you could get frustrated, but the truth is you're still the same person you were before your car broke down as you are after, right? And he's saying if you notice that that person is still the same, if you notice that that person is right, if you notice what's going on in the self, you can actually have a better position to decide what the outcome will be. Meaning, if my car breaks down, I can be super mad. I can start kicking and yelling the car, but well, that's not going to help. Or I could say, I'm still myself. The car has a problem, but I know that I can fix it. Or I can fix the situation. So it's a really short chapter 2, and well, they're all short, but really interesting that every book that we have just about read has talked about breathing.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay.
So chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Stay curious about yourself. Asking for feedback.
The dreaded feedback.
The dreaded feedback. But also really interesting. I mean, there's a lot to be said in this, especially when you're talking to people you trust, people who really want the best for you. I think that is the way that you build confidence, is you start with the people that you can most trust to give you to tell you things, and for you to evaluate them, not on an emotional level, but on a truth level. So he has steps here. I'll quickly go through those. Number 1 is just be clear you want honest feedback. Is saying don't be nice, be helpful. Say things that will help in different ways. Number 2 is focus on the future. How can you actually grow into that feedback that has been given to you? I personally hate when problems are given and there's and they're just wanting to say the problem. They're not thinking anything about, well, but it's okay. We've got these strengths, we've got these tools, we can fix it, 3 is probe more deeply, meaning if they're giving you generalities, that can be too vague. And it's dangerous, in my opinion, to just get generalities like, well, you're not a good communicator. Well, how do I fix a generality? I need a specific. Is it because I'm wandering? Is it because am I using misunderstanding? You have to go deeper, because your brain would only fixate on a generality that you can't do anything about. Okay, 4 was listen without judgment, meaning don't necessarily just defend yourself. This is all about being curious. And then 5, write down what they say.
Yeah, and interesting why he says that. He gives the reasons, 2 reasons. He says, if you're literally writing down, like if you're giving me feedback and I'm writing it down, this silence that occurs while I'm writing it down communicates to you, the feedback giver, that I'm taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And it also gives you an opportunity maybe to develop a follow-up thought. And then he concludes by saying, it may not feel good at the time, but it will be helpful.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, this is good stuff. And it's all, of course, to build confidence. I will say, when I was younger, I did not get feedback. I didn't receive, well, I just can say I didn't receive feedback. But the more you can stay curious and remind yourself, of course, while you're doing some deep breathing, while trusted friends are sharing feedback, the more you can change the you can change the perspective about it and say, okay, Scott's not trying to hurt me. He's just giving me honest feedback that I asked for. And let me just be curious about this because I know that I can learn, I can grow because that's what God wants for us. So really great part. I mean, this is just half of part 1 of element 1. So we're going to keep going through piece by piece and hopefully you'll grow in confidence.
That's right. All right.
Yeah.
Join us the next time and we'll keep it going.
All right.
Pick up the book though by Peter Bregman. I think this one's going to be I think they're all worth your time, but Leading with Emotional Courage. All right. See you next time.